welcome to our session. Title of our session is right on display, S&OP, no bullshit. Now, I'd be the first one to admit that that is a bit of a provocative title, but let me hope that at the end of this talk, you will find it a bit more rounded than the way it may have come across. One thing I find important, and also after having listened to the sessions this morning, is to make sure that you don't go home or that you don't go away from this event with the feeling this S&OP and this IBP is all too big for me. Nothing is ever too big for you if you decide to chop it up in pieces and if you decide to focus on the essentials of that moment, but you need to do so with proper vision in sight. And I think that is the message I would want you to take home from the sessions this morning. Now, allow me to introduce myself, Unico de Meester. I represent Remira, but maybe some of you will know me better as Unico de Meester representing Outperform. I gave an interview with Supply Chain Media earlier this year, and that was still sort of on behalf of Outperform. But a big transition took place recently. Early May, Outperform was acquired by Remira. So we continue today as Remira, or as Outperform, a Remira company. Reflecting a little bit on what was said this morning, I couldn't resist it. There was talk about cars, and there was talk about cars and how you select cars and what your opinion is. And maybe to better introduce myself, let me share with you honestly what my car is. Quite off the beaten track, but earlier this year I had some considerations like what should I do with this car in light of environmental pressure and so forth. And quite unlike maybe to what you would expect, you would maybe expect me to sell this car and then buy another one, electrical. I couldn't find the electrical car that was small and economic enough to sort of serve 80% of my duties and still keep the freedom to have occasionally 6 kids in the back and drive them to the hockey field, or maybe put a lot of sales that I need to get transported from A to B. And with that as a problem, I didn't really feel like buying a big electrical car. So here's what I did. I signed up for My Wheels. And the moral of that story is everybody is different. And also considerations are different. And you need to really select the solution for the problem based on the why. And the why here was I wanted to economize a little bit. I wanted to do good for the environment. And I didn't really need a big car. But I did need a car that could occasionally do more than 300 kilometers. So My Wheels is my answer to that. And I don't own the car, but My Wheels over here owns me. And My Wheels is then a typical example of a new style company that is basically existing by virtue of a process. And we've heard the word process a lot in today's sessions, and the word process is extremely important in understanding S&OP and where you want to go with it. Let me then explain why I ever went into S&OP and why we ever stated that Outperform is an S&OP solution. Because there's a lot of variation on what people understand when you use the word S&OP. But my version is S&OP is really sales and operations planning. And it's the and in the middle that matters. Now, in the talk of Henkel this morning, we also learned about S&OP and S&OE. So in reflection to that, I added this small e because if I need to convey what we as Outperform and as Remira stand for, we stand for the connection between sales and operations, and we also stand for running that right through to operation. And a few of the remarks and few of the no bullshit remarks I will be making are dedicated to that connection. And it's the connection between people from different departments, people from sales and operations that don't naturally connect to each other, marketing with new product introductions and product lifecycle management and innovation, disrupting basically the balance between sales and operations. And if you bring those forces together in one system, then what you get is S&OP. And the bodybuilder underneath is conveying sort of the power and the impact of synchronizing these processes, what impact that can have on your company. I mean, I would really sort of take up an arm pressing context with any of these guys, but with these guys, I mean, I would settle for a bit more modesty and say, you are my major. And the whole idea of systems and processes is to bring your company up from that previous disconnected phase into that connected phase. The word's been mentioned, COVID, and the word's been mentioned that COVID has disrupted the world. And it has not only disrupted the world, it has also taught us a lot. With all due respect, we were as Outperform already a little bit ahead of the game, because we were less than, before we joined into Remira, we were 20 people, but spread over 7 locations. And if I'm honestly counting in the US, it's actually 8 locations. So we're already quite used to that remote working. But what the remote working has taught us is that, yeah, you need to do away a little bit with the fluff and the frills around it. And that sometimes feels sad, because I also am a person that likes the interaction and likes the challenges and likes to be in the bar or in the coffee machine and make a joke. But if it's purely about the process and the matter on hand, it basically can also help a lot to just be dedicated to that 1 hour slot that needs to start on time, that needs to finish on time, and that needs to have a conclusion, because there's no room for the sort of the chat afterwards in the corridor. And not only is there no room for that because there is no corridor, but also you saw that people were indeed trying to book meetings back to back, because if the meeting really stops at 12, another meeting can start at 12:01. So what we saw is new ways and less fluff. The pre-lockdown meetings compared to the online meetings, they were just stricter and more to the point. And that's good for most things. It's not ideal for things like cultural change. So in the context of sales and operations planning, there will still be a lot of benefit from events like today, inside your own company. But for the pure matter, and I'm now talking as a software vendor, for the pure matter of putting a sales and operations planning system in place, the new way of working may not be so bad after all. There's a lot of efficiency gain to be had. And not only is there efficiency gain, but there's also a need for trustworthy systems that you really, when they show it's 25 on the screen, that you can believe it's 25 on that screen. So what is then our version of the famous words, IBP, S&OP, and supply chain planning? Let me first say, and that's again in response to a feeling, oh, this might be too big for me. Every company has this. You may not be aware of it, but every company has it. Let me just show a simple example of how we look at IBP, S&OP, and SCP. This event, do we want to be present in this market? Do we have the budget for it? Okay, let's do it. That's the IBP decision from Remira to be present at this event. Then the S&OP decision, do we have time for this event? And do we have the capacity to prepare? Well, the honest answer is, of course, we don't have the capacity to prepare. But we did it anyway, and because we did it anyway, some other things needed to be postponed. Really, if you look at our marketing sales Jira board, yeah, certain things that we had planned needed to be moved out in return for moving this event in. And then finally starts supply chain planning or supply chain execution. It's about ordering the roll-up banners. It's about writing the excerpts, the summary, attendee list, designing the booth, getting the merchandise organized. That's all about supply chain planning, supply chain execution. And I hope that with this simple example, I can convey that there's more IBP in your company than you might have initially thought. And don't get scared away of the 18-month journeys that you need to entertain. Yes, you may need to entertain the 18-month journey, but IBP and S&OP and supply chain planning, it's all around you. Then closer to the introduction I gave is I had promised to share some statistics, because one thing that has almost always bothered me or intrigued me is how can there be such enormous differences in sort of ability to execute on a supply chain planning, on a sales and operations planning implementation process? Why can one company just do it and another company can't get further than sort of contemplating, considering it, but not really delivering on it? The first thing I did is statistics. Now, as you can see, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. It's been pretty difficult to get this into a convincing picture. Excel and the charting abilities of Excel weren't always helping me, but over here is the amount of money spent, and over here is the amount of money spent per user, and over here, the orange line is the amount of tangible impact that the client has enjoyed. And as you can see from this chart, is really a very erratic line, and there's absolutely no correlation between the amount of money spent per user and the success and impact that the company has. Now, a happier note maybe is that you see in this corner, which is the high impact and reasonable to low cost corner, there's a bit of a cluster, but there's a few outliers over there. And to make it simpler for you, I just talk about some tangible examples, and hopefully that will inspire you to think through what that means for your company and what it could mean for accelerating or for being more successful in your sales and operations planning implementation process. So some simpler statistics, 2020, very fresh. Company number 1 spends 100K on implementation. Company number 2 spends 300K, 60K on implementation. They have the same scope, same timeline, and they've got roughly 6 months before start and go live, or before start, and I should be precise, initial go live, because after go live, there's always improvement rounds. The question to ask here, did company 1 do it right and did company 2 do it wrong? And asking the question is almost answering them. The answer is no. Both companies did it right, but company 1 did a lot more by themselves, and company 2 relied a lot more on the vendor and on the consultants and on the implementation efforts and IT efforts done by the vendor. Now that can be a choice, but I really encourage you, let it be a choice, and force yourself or select yourself a vendor where this can be a choice. If you want to do things more by yourself because you feel that saves you money and gives you a sense of control and gives you lower cost of ownership long term, then it should be possible. If you want to outsource it and say, get it done, because it's not really not my forte, it's not my specialism to do these kinds of things, data loading and selecting things from the ERP system and so forth, then do it the other way, but make sure that your vendor can do both. Company 3, however, shows a 4 years start to go live, and planning and rigging up the planning system is considered the job of a trainee. And that has always struck me as how can this possibly be true? But it is true. And I must say, we work with the company, there's new management and new ideas, and now finally planning gets the attention it deserves, and you will see the company has gone live and is enjoying the benefits. But this is not dreamt up for this talk. This is still happening in the market. Just so make sure you know what you're getting into, and make sure that inside your organization you give this project, you give this adventure the right status. And I think I'm really copying everything that was said by the big leaders from the industry, Heineken and Henkel. 2021, again, X and Y, 3K aftercare, 60K aftercare. Company Y is more ambitious, or company Y is having a slightly more difficult supply chain. Company Y is having a differently organized IT department, which means that things that company X is doing themselves, company Y is not doing themselves, and therefore they need to spend money on it. Neither company X nor company Y is wrong or the better of the two. They're just different. Company Z is an interesting one as compared to X and Y on the previous slide, because that's the 2021 statistic, 60-day implementation spend, and live, up and running, successful, and not having an ERP system. Now that's even challenging for us, not having an ERP system, but you can actually build your sales and operations planning tool on top of an Excel infrastructure, or on top of an infrastructure that's not necessarily supported by ERP. But the foundational role of ERP can also not truly be denied. But what can also not be truly denied is that this company Z has benefits and is not postponing their decision to go for a planning system just because they need to work 3 years on getting their ERP system settled. But now we have company A, and they started on June 1st, 2021. We spent 20 hours and no IT efforts from Outperform other than just lending a hand here or there. And they are planning towards going live. And that is a company that itself is only a supply chain. They don't have warehouses. They don't have machines. They have designs. They have a marketing presence. They have a web shop. And I'll let out the word, they sell big bags over the internet. And I've seen that company come to life over the course of the last 5-6 years. And the first 2 years, not a single big bag moved around the globe. Not a single big bag was sewed up or touched. All the company did in the first 2 years is organize the supply chain. The rest came later. And because that company thinks that way, that company also thinks differently about a sales and operations planning implementation, about a sales and operations planning system. They see it as an app. They say, I sign up via the internet, I give it a try, I put my data in, see what happens, and then I move on to the next station. And this is the type of company that has this as an action plan. And not a single hour of consultancy was spent on them, other than maybe the initial talks and demos and them looking at the movies. And then this guy comes up with, okay, apparently this is what I need to do to get to a minimum viable product and to really get benefit out of this system. So give this a thought. It need not be a 9-month, 18-month journey. I have educated, it takes 9 months to grow a baby for at least 20 years in a row. That will shrink into, you can have sales and operations planning, or you can have a planning solution in anywhere between 2 and 3 months. So in summary, IBP, S&OP, supply chain management, supply chain planning, supply chain optimization, advanced planning and scheduling, forecasting and planning, sales forecasting and planning. To be honest, it's all the same thing, it's planning. Another thought I'd like to share in this talk is that there was a notion this morning that IBP is the level 4, and you need to have level 1, 2, and 3, and then only you can transition into level 4. That depends very much on the industry that you're in. If you're in the physical goods and you've been running that for tens of years in a row, and you have to go through warehouses and transportation networks and retail shops and so forth, yes, then probably execution planning, sales and operations planning, and then you can have this link to financial and link to strategy, and you can link it up to IBP. But if you're in the fashion industry, where you sell creativity and design, then IBP is your starting point. IBP is this amount of money in women clothing above the waist, this amount of money women below the waist, this amount in shoes, this amount in men's clothing, and this is my target. And from that target onwards, I design my collection. And it's a whole different mindset, and the software should be able to reflect that. And that's why Outperform is in food and beverage and in physical supply chains, in batteries coming from Asia, but is not strongly in the fashion industry. Remira has other solutions for that kind of a problem. But the overall notion is all is planning. From our perspective, and now I start talking as a software vendor, if your planning system does not push out the purchase and the production and the transport proposals to an execution system, you're not done yet. And the phrase, are you done yet, is a phrase that comes from my colleague from a long time back. And done is an important word in implementation. Done is an important word in business process rearranging. Are you really done? And the reason I'm saying that is it need not be made overcomplicated. End of the day, if your plan is correct, then this is the decision that you trust, and this is the list of purchase and production and transport proposals that you pump out. One of our smallest and most modestly budgeted clients is actually only using this report. Our system has at least 200, I didn't bother to count them beforehand, but 200, maybe 250 different reports, and all they're using is this, and the rest is all running in the background. It's not impossible to achieve that, and it's definitely a very simple and very tangible target to have. Saying we are not done until we can trust the suggestions made at this very last point of the process. I've now shown one screen of Outperform Planning. If you want to know more about Outperform Planning, don't listen to this talk, but just go to our website and know that there is a try for free. There is a documentation button, and the documentation button will bring you to this Zendesk. And on this Zendesk, you will find videos, and you will find more verbose documentation in Words. You'll find architecture, PDFs. We've taken the decision to open it all up. Everybody can see, including our competitors, because we believe that you should be enabled to decide what is best for your future. We're willing to help, and this is our answer to our willingness to help. And just in case you only, as a follow-up, have only this PowerPoint, then these are the hyperlinks that you can go to. So if your planning system does not push it out, then you're not done yet. Maybe there's another way to give a very targeted goal and to see whether your implementation is a success. Lots of people still rely on Excel. Excel is a killer app. Excel is the biggest competitor of all sales and operations planning and supply chain planning vendor. And if on the outset of your project, you say, I've got this list of Excel sheets and I want to cut that down to these remaining 7 and the other 18, I need to have absorbed in my sales and operations planning solution, then you have a very clear and tangible target to chase. And it's very easy to decide whether you're truly done and whether your supplier has delivered and whether your team has delivered. And one company that brilliantly showed this is a customer from a while ago, but still very much a customer intensively using our software, Innocent Drinks. They're marvelous at marketing things in a visual manner. And this was their situation before the project started. And after the project started, the Excel sheets weren't cut down to 0, but a very good portion was cut down. And the remaining portion, you can then reassess and say, what is the value if we get this absorbed in the planning system, and what is the cost? And you can just make informed decisions to go forward or to live with that set of spreadsheets for a while longer. The last one is the best way to postpone S&OP benefits is to delay the start. It's been mentioned today in various talks, and it's really one that I would want you to take home. So, I'm getting to the end of the talk. Why implementations fail? Lack of a clear goal, agreed and common. And that need not be very high level, vague in the cloud. It cannot be as tangible as we've got 25 spreadsheets involved with this planning problem, and we admit that these 7 will probably not be covered by the solution, but these 18 should be covered by the solution, else we haven't done our job. Next one. Overcomplicating or backpedaling. And I'm sorry to say, and I say this a lot when I'm at family drinks and birthday parties, I am working in the IT industry. I'm not always proud of my colleagues, and I'm not always proud of my IT industry. There is a tendency to unnecessarily overcomplicate things. Perfectionism. Think of that list with the purchase orders, and think of that company that I described that is doing big bags. Of course, they want to do the purchase orders in such a way that it fills up a container. Do they insist on having an algorithm for that immediately from day one, with all the complexities and trade-offs that such a problem brings, filling up a full container? That's not just a mathematical problem. That's also a judgment problem, like how important is the full container versus other things. And do they insist on having that? Or do they say, hey, I can just drag a net and sum up, and I can just tick the marks that fill up a container. For now, I'll do that by hand, and in a subsequent step, I'll find out if we invest in an algorithm. That's the kind of perfectionism versus pragmatism trade-off that I recommend you to have, so that you don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. I'm done, slightly over time. I apologize. Thank you for your time. And if you want to know more about this, Remira.com, outperformplanning.com. Outperformplanning.com, a Remira company. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Unico, for your great presentation. Thank you, Remira, for joining us at S&OP Vendor Day as a sponsor. All the people who joined the session, thank you very much. And please look up to the colleagues of Unico in their booth. You can find it in your screen on AirMeet, or maybe you can meet them in the lounge. Thank you very much, and hopefully till next time.
Okay, that means I'm done, Hugo.